Good afternoon, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to UCLA. Welcome back to so many of you from the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative. It's wonderful to see you here again. We are, as you know, here for a panel discussion and film screening that's focused on advancement of human rights amidst the global refugee crisis. Thank you so much for taking time today on this weekend to join us. As we get started, I'd like to invite everyone to please silence your phones and take a moment to do that. My name is Hannah Gary, and I am the Executive Director of the Promise Institute for Human Rights at UCLA Law School. I'm also a law professor. I teach international human rights and refugee law. And the Promise Institute is the Center of Human Rights Education, research, and advocacy at UCLA, and is a leader locally and globally for addressing some of the most critical human rights abuses right here at home and also globally. And this includes focus on human rights violations and protection of rights of refugees and migrants. The Promise Institute is so pleased today to co-host this event at UCLA with the Aurora Humanitarian Institute, whose mission is to amplify and tangibly support individuals like the inspiring Marguerite Barankitse, who we will hear from today, a recipient of the 2016 Aurora Prize. And as you will come to understand from today's discussion and screening, Maggie is an incredible, courageous example to us of all of the power that each of us has to bridge divides, including ethnic divides, and work in solidarity with others for our shared humanity. At great personal cost, Maggie has spoken out against persecution, personally hidden targeted individuals, and cared for tens of thousands of children and refugees. This afternoon, our panel will be focusing on advancement of refugee rights, and this topic is not just timely, but urgent. State cooperation and compliance for protection of refugees, as is required under international law, is at an all-time low. And in my lifetime, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, we have actually witnessed increased state cooperation and compliance, not with the law, but cooperation with each other to actively avoid upholding the law, avoid protecting refugees, deterring them through grave human rights violations, such as indefinite detention or family separation here at our own southern border in the United States, and weaponizing and demonizing refugee flows, particularly but not only in the West. And this behavior has increased in direct response to the largest number of refugees we've seen since World War II, with rapid increase from around 15 million in the mid-90s after the fall of the Berlin Wall to nearly 44 million today. And this doesn't even include the 68 million that are internally displaced within their countries. That's often a precursor to refugee status when you cross the border. And it doesn't include the 7 million that are seeking asylum. And these numbers come from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees' latest global report. But not only is refugee protection and asylum increasingly closed off, but also for those who do get to escape into exile, the full rights that they are entitled to as simply being human beings is not available to them. As refugees used to say to me when I worked in Uganda and Kenya in the mid-1990s doing in-depth interviewing, it's as if we jumped out of the fire and into the frying pan, coming from fleeing atrocity situations, persecution, into the host countries. So today our distinguished panel will help us to understand the current complexities of the global refugee crisis and explore how diverse organizations and voices can effectively address the challenges faced by displaced populations, pointing to ongoing examples of impactful work being done worldwide to support these populations and advance their rights. I look forward to this critical discussion, and thank you all for being here today, for sharing about your expertise and your incredible work. Please join me in welcoming our guests.
The Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity is the flagship program of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative that seeks to address humanitarian challenges around the world. The prize is a global humanitarian award that recognizes and supports individuals who put themselves at risk to save the lives, health, or freedom of those suffering as a result of violent conflict and major human rights violations. each Aurora Prize laureate is given $1 million and an opportunity to continue the cycle of giving by allocating the majority of their prize money to help the most destitute. This approach helps the initiative create a ripple effect that has impacted the lives of over 3.2 million individuals across 56 countries and territories, facing war, displacement, conflict, persecution, and other humanitarian issues. Aurora exemplifies the concept of gratitude in action, celebrating the power of the human spirit that compels one to act in the face of adversity for the benefit of others.
Hi, everybody. My name is Armine Afeyan. I'm the CEO of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with us today. So today we have, as you heard from Hannah, a wonderful panel of people who are practicing on the front lines, both here in the U.S., in a place a lot of us call home, and around the world. This is a particularly timely conversation with the ongoing rhetoric around the state of U.S. aid globally and what's going to be happening there. The way that this is going to work today is I'm going to give a little bit of context. We're going to have a bit of a conversation, but my priority is really coming back to this group. And so please keep in mind as we go your questions for our panelists and anything that you would like to share to contribute to the conversation. The Aurora Dialogues is a global series of conversations that we've had online and in person over the last nearly 10 years of Aurora's existence. The idea being to talk about the pressing humanitarian issues of the day, but more than that, actually to proliferate humanitarianism and to help show different ways that each of us can be a humanitarian by the example of some of the extraordinary people that come and sit on the panels. Today in particular, we're going to be discussing some of the challenges around advancing human rights in the context of global displacement and migration. I don't think I need to tell this group just how bad the crisis is, but I will go ahead and do so anyway. As of mid-2024, 122 million people, in excess of that, are displaced due to persecution, conflict, violence, human rights violations, disasters, and climate change. Of those, 43.7 million are refugees, and the balance, about 72.1 million, are IDPs, that's internally displaced people. Just this week, the UN estimates that a further 280,000 Syrians have been displaced from the latest escalations in violence. And we have several people in the room who are working, including Shadi, who are working in Syria or have family in Syria. Just devastating news out of the region. The issue isn't going anywhere. Displacement has increased year on year for the last 12 years, and 2/3 of refugees have been displaced for more than 5 years. This work is personal to me. I myself am the first in my family in 3 generations over 100 years not to be forcibly displaced, and so I grew up with a lot of gratitude for that fact. The thing I really want to hone in on in terms of the facts, and this will be the last of the facts that I share to set our baseline, is that the UNHCR estimates that between 2018 and 2023, 2 million children were born as refugees. That's the entire population of Houston, Texas. If that doesn't mean anything, maybe you can think about half of LA being babies born as refugees. And what that means is that they come into life, they celebrate their first birthday, already facing issues like difficulty navigating systems due to strict asylum policies, let alone all of the shifting in asylum policies that have to be navigated, forcible return to danger zones, mass expulsions, and other refugee protection violations, and limited to no access to education for children who have been displaced, certainly in the immediate aftermath, although, of course, I think we all know that there are some really phenomenal educational models happening in temporary homes and in third countries to try to address that issue. So without further ado, I want to welcome our panelists this afternoon. We have Burundian activist Marguerite Barankitse, the 2016 inaugural Aurora Prize laureate. She has dedicated her life to saving children threatened by conflict. Shadi Martini is a Syrian businessman originally who set up an underground network to provide health care to Syrians affected by the conflict. He's now CEO of the Multifaith Alliance, which we'll hear about more shortly. And Dulce Valencia, who is joining us locally from LA. She is the Associate Director of Entertainment Media at Define America. She works in the media space on refugee and immigrant narratives. Really, really excited to hear about that. The way that we tend to structure these Aurora Dialogues conversations is that, for example, Shadi and Marguerite are Aurora humanitarians. They work around the world. We also like to partner with someone who is local to the community, particularly as we're in the U.S., working in the U.S. And so Dulce, we're really excited excited to hear from you. Following this discussion, there's going to be a special screening of a documentary about Marguerite, who, after witnessing the execution of 72 of her friends and colleagues, embarked on an extraordinary mission in Burundi to shield her people from the ravages of conflict and corrupt governance, and to rescue tens of thousands of children in peril, providing them with safety, security, and most importantly, love, which I'm sure you'll hear from her in just a moment. I want to thank you all once more for being here, for coming out to join us in this discussion on a Saturday when you could be in many other places. We really do value your time, and so without further ado, let's get into it. My first question to the whole group, and just to maybe we work down the line and then we'll see how the ordering goes, is what do you do when you're not here? Who do you work with and why? So maybe Dulce, you can start.
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Dulce Valencia, Associate Director of Media and Entertainment at Define American, and we are a media organization that works across media to humanize immigrant narratives across storytelling. And so we primarily work with other storytellers, whether that be filmmakers, writers, influencers even. We work across them to humanize immigrants. At the core of Define American is a belief that politics are downstream from culture, and we cannot change the politics of immigration until we first change the culture through which immigrants are seen. And this is work that's incredibly personal to me as an immigrant who was formerly undocumented for most of my life, and also as just a fan of television. And so, that's the work we do. We've consulted on over 125 different TV shows and films across 23 networks, and I'm very, very excited to be here with such incredible panelists.
If I can ask a quick follow-up, any highlights from your work in the last few years? Anything that you kind of want to share with the group?
Is anyone familiar with a show called Superstore or Grey's Anatomy?
Yeah.
We consulted on those shows. So Superstore has a character named Mateo, who is, I think, one of the first main characters to be undocumented on a primetime show. And we worked with the creatives throughout the entire run of the show on his character and what his arc should be. And for Grey's Anatomy, we consulted on an episode they did where a doctor is a DACA recipient, which is a program called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And that episode was viewed by over 11 million different people. So those are just a little bit of highlights.
Just some casual highlights of the group. And by the way, I know that we're understandably, because people came in this way, loaded to this room. I'm going to be facing a lot this way. If you have a hard time seeing, I don't think you'll have a hard time hearing, do not hesitate to shift yourself. You are completely welcome, or you're welcome to stay put. I just don't like to be rude and turn my back. So Shadi, same question. What do you do when you're not here? Who do you work with? Why?
I run an organization called Multifaith Alliance, and the idea behind Multifaith Alliance is to bring groups from different faith groups that usually don't work together to advocate for issues concerning refugees and to provide direct humanitarian assistance and projects throughout the world. But our focus was mainly the Middle East. At the beginning, we started with Syria because Syria was the hot topic when our organization was established in 2014. And it was actually like Syrians were the target of all attacks concerning refugees because they were the biggest refugee population back then. So we brought our organization now has an umbrella about 100 organizations, and we thought that bringing these groups together is a powerful method, especially for advocacy, and to bring organizations that usually don't do this type of work. What do? I usually am somewhere around the world on the ground trying to work and implement a project or work with locals on issues that they face and problems that they have. In the last 10 years, I've been on the front line of most of this big refugee, let's say, migration, especially in Europe, especially in the Balkan area, in Greece and Bulgaria. I was there on the ground and witnessed what's going on and the challenges that people face and the hardship. And after that, we also worked with the refugees when they went into these countries. How are they going to get registered? What refugee centers they're in? How can they get their documents? How can they work? where do I live, the language barrier that most of them had. And it all comes back to me because I was a businessman, like Armine said. I never thought I would become a refugee myself. Syria traditionally in the last 60 years wasn't a country that had a lot of refugees going out of it, and all of a sudden I became one. So I understood that it doesn't matter who you are, what's your status, or what it is, you can become a refugee instantly. And I think that's something very important for everyone to know, that any one of us can become a refugee any day. So it was a motivation for me to try to help others that wasn't as lucky as me to be able to travel. I had another citizenship which allowed me to travel, and that was lacking to most of the people that had to flee and had to cross borders that are very dangerous, and sometimes the seas, and a lot of people lost their lives because of that. So that motivated me that there needs to be a process and a way so people can get to safety in a more humane and a safe way.
It's really, really wonderful to hear. And again, our collective hearts go out to those being impacted by the escalating violence and uncertainty in Syria this week. A bit of a softball, and it's going to feel like a bit of a shift before we come to you, Marguerite. Speaking about narratives around refugees and different ethnicities, in the last 10, 15 years, when you hear Syria, oftentimes a U.S. ear will think refugee. I certainly didn't grow up that way. A lot of my friends' parents were immigrants from Syria. Myself, I'm descended from a refugee from Lebanon, in and out of Syria several times, as we talked about, and then ultimately into Canada. So again, softball question. You mentioned you went to, I think, Aleppo Kitchen in LA last night.
Yes.
Is that right? Or a friend's restaurant. What's your favorite Syrian food for a different association?
Okay, so we're very picky with our food, but
good. You should be.
Being from Aleppo, we are very famous for a dish called kibbeh, which is it's done in so many different ways. It can be raw, it can be fried, it can be on barbecue. So all variation of kibbeh is my favorite dish, and I had 4 of them yesterday.
Nice. That's really, really good. This is exactly Syrian kibbeh would be my word association, certainly my preferred word association. Marguerite, coming over to you, same question. When you're not here, you traveled a long way to be with us. You came in from Burundi, and we thank you so much for that. What is it that you're doing? Who are you working with, and why?
Hi, everybody. I am so sorry because this evening you will hear French, English. I don't know which language, but I will try because I am not shy. I work with kids. Then if you don't understand, please ask to the neighbor what I have said. Of course, I am Burundian. I come from Burundi. Where I live today, I must hide because I am a criminal. Then I never say where I am. Normally, I am based in Rwanda, but officially, I am in Luxembourg. Because, between countries, because we are neighbors, they have convention. Then I always, when I travel, I said, I am a citizen of the world. I am lucky to travel. The other can't travel. And when you ask me what I do, they wrote always, Maggie, when you go to Google, they will say, a crazy woman. The crazy woman from Burundi, and I prefer to be a crazy. Why I do what I do, it's the suffering. Since I was 3 years old, I have seen the movement of Tutsi Rwandese coming in my hometown, and I can't understand. I ask, why they speak the same language? We look like they are not. Why they call them refugees? And when we were at school, when I began primary school, I see that they separate, but we speak the same language. Then I grew, and I was thinking what I can do for those stupidity politicians to change this situation. I became a teacher, and I want to create a new generation, Hutu and Tutsi and Batwa, Congolese, Rwandese, together, and to show that it's possible because our human vocation, our best vocation, sublime vocation is to love and to distribute happiness. But I don't know which way I can do that. Unfortunately, in October 1993, when the biggest massacres broke in my country, I lost around 60 members of my family. And I continue to say, why? Why people can kill their neighbors because of ethnic group? And then I freed my village. But I met my colleague, Hutu and Tutsi. I said, why we are so stupid? We can be together. And then I was the secretary of the Catholic bishop. And then I said, okay, this is a place to celebrate our brotherhood. I tell to the Hutu, Tutsi, we stay here and we will be together and show that we are brothers and sisters. And it was Sunday. I said, Sunday we celebrate, and almost the people were Christian. I said, okay, we are children of God. And unfortunately, people came to revenge. I am not full of shame to tell you that some members, those who killed, were also members of my family. They said, we come to revenge. I said, you are so stupid. You will become criminal also. Killers, like those who killed yesterday our families. But they didn't listen to me. They tired me, and they killed 72 people in front of me. Then, since this time, I said, I will. If they didn't kill me, I have a new vocation. Then what I tried to do in Burundi, it was to create a new generation who will be able to break this cycle of violence. I succeed, of course, because I work with many humanitarian organizations, and I saved so many kids, child soldiers, AIDS children, street children, and I create many things to give dignity to my people. Unfortunately, in 2015, I stood up to denounce, and then they tried to kill me. Then I became a refugee, but I never give up. I create again in Rwanda a new generation. I worked today in a refugee camp and in the town, the main town of Rwanda, in Kigali, to give hope, to create a new generation, and to tell to all those people, when the journalist asked me, what is your job? I said, it's to stop, to tell to the people, stop to be stupid, stand up, speak up, rise up, and then to create a paradise, because our vocation, is to transform this world into paradise. Yes, it's what I want.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We can hear that the work that you do is very challenging, but to hear you, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Marguerite for 10 years, because I was with Aurora in its very first year, and Marguerite's the inaugural laureate, but to have almost a decade of hearing you tell it with such a smile and with so much love. And I think what that speaks to, certainly what comes to my mind, is the power of narrative and the power of story. Speaking of, I have to say, I misspoke in saying that Marguerite came in from Burundi. She, of course, came in from Rwanda. She's unable to live in Burundi, but that's a narrative I'd like to speak into reality. I'd like for you to be able to go home as well one day. So along that thread, coming back to you, Dulce, you, of course, work telling authentic narratives of immigrants on some of the room, it sounds like, favorite shows. Pretty exciting. But what was the turning point that drove you to embrace the storytelling? I think you alluded to possibly some of it in terms of your background, but would love to hear more.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, this work is incredibly personal to me. And what drove me to do this work was DACA. And so DACA was announced in 2012. I was in high school and I was so excited because I was finally going to be DACA, for those unfamiliar, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It gave work permits and protection from deportation to certain young people. And they were these work permits were to be renewed every 2 years, and it was going to be transformative, life-changing. I was in high school, so I thought this was my saving grace. I was going to be able to go to college. I was going to be able to be quote-unquote normal. And then I gather all my documentations, all my awards, and everything, and I show up to a lawyer, and they tell me I don't qualify. And that is because there was a cutoff date, and I missed it by just a couple of months. And so being a teenager and getting told no for the first time was really, really shattering, because you're a teenager and you're really dramatic. And so I thought my life was over, everything was going to end. And then, at the same time, I was very happy for all these people that were getting DACA, and their lives were changing. And I saw kind of like the story that was being told, and it was, these are the dreamers, these are the people that did the right thing and are getting rewarded for it. And then I saw who was being left out of that narrative and that story, and it was people like me, people who didn't qualify, or our parents who aren't young dreamers. And so that's when I started to kind of like piece together how important stories are and what the story that gets told is. And at the same time, I was falling in love with theater, and I decided to go to college for theater. And that's where I started to see like the tradition of storytelling and just like making that connection of how the stories that we see impact how we walk around in the world. I often joke that my personality is based on whatever the last movie or book I read is. And then I started doing this work, and I realized that there's a word for that, and it's called like parasocial contact theory. And that is a theory also known as the will and grace effect, where people will create these imagined friendships or parasocial relationship with the characters that they see on TV. And so then this imagined friendship and seeing those characters over time, over multiple episodes or seasons, make these characters feel real and can change people's perceptions. And so going back to the character of Mateo in Superstore, we actually studied that effect and found that people who created this parasocial relationship to Mateo were then more likely to take action in support of immigrants or to just support immigrants in general. And so it's this really beautiful thing of this moment of really just being at my lowest and not knowing what the future could be, and now knowing how important stories are, and getting to do this work and getting to work with filmmakers and writers and to tell these stories, and then actively see how these stories can then over time change how people see immigrants. And the hope is that will eventually trickle down to politics and help us change the laws so that this country becomes more accepting.
It's really, really wonderful. And there's a titan in your industry, Shonda Rhimes, who, of course, in addition to many popular TV shows, Grey's Anatomy is one of them. And I had the opportunity to see an interview with her earlier this year. She said something to the effect, and I may be paraphrasing, but if you can't see it, you can't be it. Mm-hmm. And so she prioritizes putting narratives of people who are like her, look like her, or look like others who haven't seen themselves on screen as a method of helping people be. But for you, Shadi, you've done it and you didn't see it. You're doing something that didn't really, in terms of Multifaith Alliance, I gather you didn't really see growing up. So how does that work? How did you manage to do it when you hadn't seen it yourself?
Yeah, well, I had an event that transferred my life, let's say, to make me think of life in a different way. So it was 2013, and I was immense of trying to bring aid into Syrian and displaced and who are being displaced and helping. And I had a couple of people come approach me through a mutual friend and said they want to help refugees. And I was like, okay, what's the issue? We can help out. And they said, well, there's a catch. And I was like, what's the catch? Said, well, they're from an Israeli NGO. And my whole world changed. Like, I'm from a background that I've never met one, like, to be honest. I've never met someone from Israel. So I was like, why? This is my first question. Why do they want to help? Why do they care? And after that, it turns out that they're humanitarian, like me. And somehow that put me in a mindset that, you know, I don't need to prejudge people or look at it. And that brought me to the whole interfaith world, to me as a Muslim working with Jews, Christians, other faith groups to serve humanity. And that's, you know, started, and when 2015 was the refugee issue was mainly in the election. And I took doing the retail business. You're doing the wholesale, like, and TV. But my job was going and doing public speaking events in churches and synagogues and mosques and so many faith organizations. But what I wanted to do is not go to areas where are receptive to refugees. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, I started going to be honest, to the coast, like the West Coast and the East Coast, mainly. And I started noticing everyone are welcoming refugees. I'm not getting the effect that I wanted. So I said, how about going to Middle America, like some states where really they don't want refugees? And that was the challenge for me. That was to go and talk to people that really don't want anyone that doesn't look like them. But I found out that in reality there are people that you can change. But I found out from a room that in a church that has 300 people, 5 people were very aggressive, but the 295 after I finished speak and took the Q&A came all to me and gave me hugs, said, you can be my neighbor. Why were we afraid of you? And one thing I learned a lot, they said, to be honest, we never met a refugee. We never met a person that looks different than us. So that gave them, you know, and I went back to my experience and how sometimes engaging with people you don't expect to engage with you change narratives and change perceptions. So that brought me into this, and really this became my passion, and I think that it helps me a lot and helps my organization, and this approach to a lot of very difficult and sensitive issue, like this interfaith, multi-faith approach, really helped to solve problems, very, very big problems. Because at the end of the day, what we look, how can we help the person who is in need right now? Mm-hmm. It's not about me. Mm-hmm. It's not about my ego. It's not about my feeling. I'm safe here. But this person who is in need right now, how can we help them to be safe or to get the safety so they could continue their life, they can educate their children, and they become a better, productive part of society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And Marguerite, you work with a constituency or a group that don't necessarily see one or the other. You work with children, and you're raising groups of children, regardless of background, to be able to be and live and exist together, which is a beautiful thing. My question for you is, what inspiration do you get from the children?
Often when people ask me how I raise those kids, I must be honest it's kids who raise me. Because in the eyes of those kids, I can give you an example. I got in 2000, a group of blind kids arrived because nobody wants those kids. And then for myself, I am not a specialist. I don't know what to do. There are not schools for those blind kids. And then I asked Bosco, why you ask to come to me? Why you want to come to Maison Shalom? Then said, we know we want to become musicians. I said, musician? Yes, because we can't see, but we can sing. We have talent. Mm-hmm. And then I asked them, can you sing for the other kids? And they began to sing. Imagine that they became famous. The club of their group was Peace and Love. You can Google them. Then they went in over the country, they traveled, they became musicians because I paid somebody to train them. But it's the inspiration came from the children. It's not me who said, okay, you will become musician or other kids. And all those kids inspired me what I can do for them and change my mind. Here, I came in 2013 in Hollywood because this group of kids, they make a film, and it's called Bosco's Guitar, because they became famous. But we must listen, even for the refugees. What I am fighting for, it's for the dignity. We think that refugees, when you see what we do, what they do for us, they think we are disabilities, but we have talent. It's not a charge. A refugee is not a charge for the host community. It's economic. They can give you other cultures, other talent, and it's what I learned during all those 30 years. And one, again, a joke, why I changed for the children, and I built more than 3,000 small houses for those kids, their families. It was Sunday, and one little boy, 8 years old, came with the parents. And the parents said, DJ, can you repeat what you have said yesterday evening before you go to sleep? Tell to Maggie. And said, I wish they die, I can come to you. I said, you wish that your parents died? Yes, because your children, they have beautiful shoes, they eat 3 times in the day, they have, you come with the car, you come to see them at school, and they have everything in this center. But you said that I am happy because I have parents, but they don't give me nothing. Then I understood that I create another social conflict. Then I close all the centers where they become like an orphanage. I began to trace those kids in their origin families, and I began to build social infrastructures, hospital, cinema, for every child not only for orphans. You see, when we listen to our community or to our beneficiary, then we can find the solution, a long-term solution. And this is a shame for our world. I told you on Monday, I don't know.
Whichever day.
When you arrive to the airport, what do you see when you arrive to the airport? Of course, some of you, perhaps they are not refugees. You will see citizen or passport, but we are refugees. We have nowhere to go. We are not citizens. We have no passport. And it's nations who create a convention in 1951 to create a nation passport. It's a travel document. And we have problems because even the police on migration, they don't know. They don't recognize our travel document. They ask, what is it? And you must, when you arrive there, you see that we are not welcome. But this is what we wish, that our world can be a world where everybody is welcome, because we are brothers and sisters, one human family.
It's really, really wonderful, Maggie, and taking inspiration from the children, really listening to the people that you are working with. That's, of course, at the heart of what we look to do at Aurora in terms of finding and funding local actors who are the best positioned to do the work that you do. And we've heard from 3 wonderful people doing work in their communities today. And so in that same spirit, I want to listen to our community in the room today and open it up for questions for our panelists. Personally, when I am on the other side of the table, I dislike not knowing how much of a chance I have. Sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to warm up to a question. I'll be taking probably 3, give or take, questions, maybe more if we have some time. So please do not be shy, is a different way of saying that.
I guess it seems like there's a lot happening right now in the area of international law. And I wondered if you all have thoughts of what seems to be the most promising efforts to, curb essentially the push factors that, cause so much refugee, so many people to flee home. Are there things that you're, more encouraged by that, perhaps, could gain momentum in coming years so that, we don't have so many refugee crises?
I think it's for any of the panelists, but maybe Shadi, do you want to take a shot at what you see out there that's promising, if anything?
I mean, you mean here in the United States or in general around the world?
Oh, I was mostly interested in international law. So ICC, ICJ, things like that.
You mean accountability, like having accountability so they could stop the flow of refugees? This is what you're talking about. I mean, it is in a way the main factor is a lot of conflicts are happening. That is having and accountability is an important thing. The issue is a lot of the major countries are not signatories to these treaties. So that's probably something that their citizens should push for. One of them is the United States. Most of these are not. So I mean, can I be a little bit more honest? I mean, a lot of initiatives are good, but in reality, what's happening is that most of the developed countries don't want refugees. And that's the policy. But what they're trying to do, because of their some image issues that they have, they're trying to pay countries on the periphery of their nations to do the dirty work for them. Because they might be not abide by the laws as much as their constraints by their constitutions or Other countries have more flexibility. I've seen it in Europe. Like countries in Southern Europe, like Turkey. I've seen it in North Africa, countries like Libya, and the treatment of the refugees that are going there. And, you see it here in the United States and more to the south with some countries, and how is it threats, is it financial means. So laws are good. What you're referring to is very good foundation, but at the end of the day, we need pressure from our own society and our own governments. And unfortunately, the indications in our society is people actually on the side of the people who want less refugees. So that's a double work on us. We need to convince people, because if we don't have the locals, we're not going to make the change. We need to convince people why refugees are not a bad thing, and how we're going to do it responsibly, and how we're going to save people's lives by bringing here, and how we are going to add value to our society. And to be human beings, to our own conscience. I mean, it's not an easy task, because people have anxieties, economic anxieties, cultural anxieties, so many factors. So how do we convince them? That's, I think, is a very good thing, in addition to laws that you mentioned that are probably also good to have.
Who create refugees? I can tell you, because I am enough old. I am 68 years old. And if I see in my region, the Great Lakes region of Africa, the war is not created from our countries. We can be honest, and I tell you, as the mom, the sister, very rich countries sometimes, because they need the richness that is there, they can create conflict. And then it's the simple, the poorest people who will flee this part and be parked in the camp. Because those who collaborate with those who need those richness, who need also this war, they have economic they send their children outside, and those that you welcome, they collaborate somehow. And I see the initiative you have make Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity. We must think, each of us, that when somehow somebody is dying, it's our humanity, and it's a part of our humanity that is dying. Then don't wait that a politician will change. We stand up and we do what we can do. Then we will stop also those movements of refugees. We can welcome our brothers and sisters without waiting, big organization will do that, or this system, or church will do that. We are members of this big family. We share, like Bishop Desmond Tutu said, Ubuntu. This philosophy, I am because we are. Then it's not the problem for UNHCR, Agency for Refugees. It's our problems. It's my answer. We must stand up. Everybody must stand up for the humanity.
I think, two compelling ways of saying there is some good out there, but ultimately we all have to do our part as well. So let's take one more question.
So I was wondering how effective is the arm of the United Nations and its infrastructure, particularly from, exploiting the victims of these refugees with rogue agencies, for example, and there are plenty of them. So would anybody like to comment on that?
The UN infrastructure is not perfect by far. And it's a reflection of the world, because it's an organization from all countries around the world. So the employees comes from these governments that some of them are creating the issues of refugees. So this is the issue with the, but do we have an alternative? I don't think so. Like, it does have a role, a positive role in certain issues, and it does work good with some governments to try to, especially with the program of resettlement, like refugee resettlement, that is a very good tool to lower the pressure on neighboring countries to conflict. Most of the refugees are around the conflict areas. They are not in Europe, they are not in the United States. They are around their regions. Since Aurora is an Armenian background and the Armenian genocide, my hometown of Aleppo was one of the biggest Armenian cities in the world, because we had the Armenian genocide happen just across the border in Turkey, and most of the Armenians that fled into Syria, and my hometown was the major city. So for me, Armenian culture growing up was part of our life. Going back to food as well, like basturman, sujuk, and this, it's like the delicacy that everyone's called, it's Aleppian. It's actually Armenian, but we claim it now. So this is where refugees are. So resettlement and other things is taking a small percentage of this huge magnitude of refugees and send it to countries like the US or Europe. So I would love for the UN to do a better work, but I can't change the world. I can change my country where I'm in. I can change the country where I vote, where I can pressure legislators. So I think that focusing on our own country is very good, and sure, we can pressure the UN and other institutions, but it's very important for us to be active here where we are and to do the work so they could pressure the UN. And the alternative of not having these agencies, I don't think it's going to bring more positives to refugees or issues connected to them. I think it's going to be worse for them. So even though it's not perfect, but still it's better than not having them.
So we're going to wrap up here because we are going to move into Marguerite's film. A number of things kind of came up. This was a pretty broad-reaching conversation, as it tends to be when you bring together people with on-the-ground experience from different parts of the world. Something that I heard loud and clear was the importance of an inspiration or a spark, whether that is seeing it on screen, living it yourself, living it again through experience, but getting the inspiration from children who are largely unmolded. The ways in which individual action can pick up from there. I think to the question on the UN, it's often said that the UN is as effective as its member states. And so all of us are, many of us, I should say actually, Marguerite, many of us are lucky to be in countries in which we are citizens, and we have an accountability to our systems, no matter whether they are working or not, to make our systems more effective, but to make the UN more effective, and then ultimately make the world just a bit better, even on the days that feels horrifically hard to do. To that end, individual action then levels up into systematic change. We see some green sprouts here and there. At Aurora, we're a kind of small part of a huge infrastructure, but what we look to do is tell individual stories as a legitimate complement to the institutional humanitarian system, to bring it a little bit closer to home, to make it a little bit clearer where there is progress being made. Because when you look on an institutional level, it can oftentimes the picture can be quite bleak. To that end, though, I do want to thank, and also my strongest compliments to Hannah Gary and to the UCLA Law School, the Promise Institute in particular, as absolute champions of that systematic change, and as, on a smaller note, hosts for today. And so a huge thank you to our hosts and a huge thank you to our panelists. Can we just get a quick round of applause? That is it from us. If you were intrigued by the conversation today, please don't hesitate to grab any of us for a chat. If you're interested in knowing more about what Aurora does, you can check out our website, subscribe to our newsletter, nominate an Aurora Laureate, or of course, it is giving season. You can choose to participate in that way. Thank you all again so much for being here. Please don't hesitate to grab refreshments, and please do enjoy the film as well.